I was on my way to Doha on Monday, June 23rd, when Iran fired a volley of ballistic missiles into Qatar. The Qatari military intercepted all but one, and aside from absolute mayhem at the airport and an unexpected night in the terminal, I was not otherwise affected. Once I'd managed to finally get a flight out of Qatar, I was thinking about what that one incursion would cost, just in terms of weapons and defences. Qatar used a US-made Raytheon M1M104 Patriot surface-to-air missile system to destroy Iran's missiles. Iran reportedly fired 7 of them, so I calculated that just in missiles alone, Qatar's defense cost around $56 million US. One single incursion and Raytheon hits pay dirt. War is expensive in every sense of the word, but I don't think we consider exactly how it's paid for. If you think that your taxpayer dollars are funding wars, then think again, because war is paid for with something far more insidious. That's right, modern warfare isn't actually paid for with your tax dollars, because if it was, your tax bill would be a heck of a lot higher. In fact, you'd probably be out on the street right now rallying against your government and their warmongering. Because here's the truth. If you live in a monetarily sovereign country like the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, etc., your government doesn't need your tax dollars to fund war. It can simply create all the money that it needs. War is paid for with the money printers. The fiat money system aids and abets prolonged, destructive modern warfare. And without this funding, well, there can be no endless wars. And that's exactly why hard money like Bitcoin matters. Let me explain why. In a monetarily sovereign country, that is, one that issues its own currency, taxes don't fund spending the way that you might think they do. Typically, we imagine a tax first, spend later scenario. The government collects our tax dollars and then allocates them according to need. But this is decidedly not the case. Central governments are not like a household. They don't need to get money from us before they can spend. When you pay your taxes, that money is essentially deleted from the system. It's removed from circulation, thus reducing inflationary pressure. It's not sitting in a vault waiting to be spent on hospitals, education, missiles, or tanks. So taxes should be understood not as a source of funds for the state, but as the following. First, a means to control inflation by removing money from the system. Second, to create demand for the currency by forcing citizens to use it to pay taxes. Third, a means of incentivizing or disincentivizing certain behaviors. And fourth, to redistribute wealth. Though, as you will see, it's not always redistributed in the way that we'd like to imagine. Anyway, when your country's central government wants to spend, whether it's on schools or bombs, it creates brand new money out of thin air. Prolonged modern wars are extraordinarily costly, but raising taxes during wartime is politically toxic. So what is a government to do? It borrows, it issues debt, and increasingly, central banks step in to buy that debt with newly created money, with a process that's functionally the same as printing it. The Second Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, over $6 trillion was spent, much of it funded with money that didn't exist beforehand. And on top of that, they left the countries that the wars were fought in utterly devastated. And today, similar mechanisms are being used to support foreign conflicts, like the US buying Israeli government bonds at federal, state, and local government levels, indirectly financing their wars. Did you know that the largest single purchaser of Israeli government bonds is Florida's Palm Beach County, coincidentally, the home of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate? As Alan Greenspan, former Fed chair, once said, the United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. And while that is true, it comes at a cost. And that cost is borne by, you guessed it, you and I, not to mention the victims of war. When governments spend newly created money on war efforts, it doesn't just disappear into the ether. That money enters the economy. It competes for real goods, oil, food, labor, often at the same time as war is disrupting global supply chains. And the result is more money chasing fewer goods. That's inflationary. And inflation is the stealth tax that hits the poor and middle classes the hardest. So while politicians claim to be fighting for freedom, they're quietly taxing your purchasing power to fund their wars. And the newly printed money enters the economy and it dilutes your existing purchasing power. It's kind of like trying to make more soup by pouring water into the pot. Wars like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, they can't be fought for years or decades without fiat money. Why? Because hard money, like gold or Bitcoin, places a natural limit on spending. You can't print it, you can't fake it, you have to raise real resources. Fiat money breaks that constraint. It gives governments access to nearly unlimited funds through inflation and borrowing. Austrian economist Friedrich Hayek warned, with fiat money, the government can finance itself by printing money instead of taxing its citizens honestly and transparently. And this is why fiat money is the currency of war, of destruction. If war is the ultimate evil, and few would disagree that it is, the fiat system is the silent enabler. The worst monsters in modern history, some of whom have been responsible for the deaths of millions of people. Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, Saddam Hussein, and North Korea's Kim dynasty all maintained their absolute control and funded their crimes with their government-backed fiat currencies. And the Bitcoin critics say that Bitcoin funds crime. That is laughable in the face of the atrocities that the fiat system has enabled. Hard money limits war, but it also creates a dilemma. It's not all sunshine and flowers. In World War I, most nations were on the gold standard. When the war began, they couldn't fund the conflict without gold reserves. So they suspended the standard. They printed money, and inflation followed. If one nation operates on fiat and the other on hard money, the fiat country has a short-term advantage. It can spend recklessly, but the long-term costs, debt, inflation, social unrest, can be devastating. And herein lies the dilemma. Which governments are going to voluntarily put themselves in a situation where superior firepower by a fiat-funded enemy state can take them out, while they try to raise more war funds from their citizens under a hard money regime? For peace to exist, there would need to be a situation where everybody is on a hard money standard. How could this work? Bitcoin changes the equation. It's not just money, it's a peace mechanism. Bitcoin is backed by real-world energy and it can't be inflated. It doesn't serve political agendas, and it doesn't bend to wartime hysteria. In a world running on Bitcoin, governments would need real public support to fund wars. Wars would have to be shorter and less frequent. And printing your way into violence would no longer be an option. As Satoshi Nakamoto hinted in Bitcoin's Genesis block, which was created during a financial crisis, this system was built to prevent the abuse of money by the powerful. And although Satoshi Nakamoto was referring to banker bailouts, Bitcoin could also prevent the worst abuses by the powerful, and that is supporting prolonged wars that nobody wants. What is the answer? I don't think there is a simple one. Governments aren't going to back a hard asset currency like the gold standard or adopt a Bitcoin standard willingly, because there is too much at stake for the powerful. It's not a stretch to say that war is a significant part of our modern economies. At least 7% of the US GDP can be attributed to the military-industrial complex, and a small percentage of very powerful people get extraordinarily rich through war. War is a racket, wrote US Major General Smedley Butler. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. I think that as individuals, the best thing that we can do is to understand that getting our investments out of the fiat system as much as possible is the biggest impact that we can make. So avoid putting your money into the military-industrial complex, either directly or indirectly. So for example, if you buy index funds like the Vanguard S&P 500, well, you're already doing that because 7 to 8% of that fund is made up of military contractors, nuclear armaments, and other ethically controversial weapons like cluster munitions and landmines. Also, avoid investing into government-issued bonds from the various countries currently involved in warmongering, and I think you can figure out who that might be. Instead, consider buying Bitcoin, which is secure, decentralized, censorship-resistant, and cannot be inflated to fund the evils of war. Wars don't start with tanks, they start with central banks. If we want peace, we have to fix the money. Bitcoin doesn't stop bullets, but it can replace the printing press that makes war possible. If this idea resonates with you, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who still thinks war is paid for with their tax dollars. Because the truth is, it's paid for with all of our futures.